All right. Welcome everybody to today's Risk and Assurance Committee meeting. We've got a nice full agenda today, so yeah, it's a good discussion, I'm sure. Give us the time in each of our areas so that we can spend the allotted time that we need. All right, I'll just would like to welcome everyone today with a karakia. Tu tau mai I ronga, tu tau mai I raro, tu tau mai I waho, tu tau mai I roto. Kia tau e taumari tu, ti mari ora ki tau katoa. Omie, huie, taie. So, apologies, I have received none. I believe we're all here, sitting around the table. Fantastic. Declarations of interest, just as always, if anything comes up today, or we do.
He's on the committee.
So probably can't. We do. Declaration of interest, just to remind everyone to raise any as we come for any matters. Confirmation of public forum. I've had no one say that they're going to present petitions for this meeting. Confirmation of our last minutes, which are there in our pack. I'm happy to move. Fantastic. Thank you, Mr. McPhail. Thank you, Councillor Ludlow. I've had no notification of extraordinary or urgent business, so just everything is per the agenda. And I've had no questions come for me as well. Chair report. So I was reflecting on a couple of sessions that I have been to since our last committee meeting. One that last month was the Treasury, so the government's advisors doing a presentation to a number of local government and I guess Treasury were talking about the headwinds that I guess everyone is facing in this country. So stubbornly high inflation, the resource shortage in staff around the country as well, forecast reduction in government spending, and sort of the known investment required in our infrastructure and around sort of climate resilience as well. So when I heard of each of those things being mentioned, of course, they were very, very pertinent to us. And then I saw an email from the OAG's Office of the Auditor General just a couple of weeks ago, and they always say what the hot topics are that they're interested in the public sector, I guess, as a whole, to be focusing on. And transparency was a key word there in terms of transparency from the public service to the people, and then performance accountability was the other one. So they're very hot on that. And I must admit, for the last few years when I've been following them, these same themes come through for them, which is good to see because they're obviously the right themes to have. And so certainly when I was thinking about transparency and performance accountability, I'll be coming through very loudly in the work that we're doing at the moment and the work that each of you are doing around the council table. So, yeah, very good. Does anyone else have any sort of councillor comments to share before we move on? Councillor Hunter.
Oh, just to reinforce what you've said, Chairman, although I wasn't on the live sessions, I watched the recordings, so and I've left my notes at home, so I can't expand on them any further, but pretty much those main things were not surprising. But they were, I think there was a bit more of a weighty, it was more weighty in the way it was delivered, I think, this time. So although the themes might be the same, I think perhaps so. And capital letters this time.
Yeah. The Treasury ones are always good to see because they've always backed up with facts and figures, which is a key bit of it.
And the next one this week is cyber security, isn't it? Yes. Will be also interesting.
Anyone else? Any other? So, I'm going to move on in our agenda to our first item on the report. This is our risk management report. We've got, and you're coming to talk to us on that. Thank you very much. I'm just going to get to the right page. All right, I am there. Fantastic. Welcome, Tanya. Thanks for your paper.
Thank you. Firstly, I'll take the report as read, but I'd like to draw your attention to a couple of points. Firstly, there has been some work continuing on the risk framework document and finalising how that pieces together and the controls effectiveness. So that work is continuing, but our focus, particularly this year, has been on business continuity. Actually, last week we held some training for the business response team. So that training was focused on roles and responsibilities and on activations, and training of the support team that will perform the support functions for the business response team. And then on Tuesday we did a desktop exercise which took the business response team through their roles, responsibilities, and just a gentle walkthrough of how they would pull together, how they would respond, and just walk them through those processes. So that was very beneficial. We've got some really good people in that business response team.
Random.
And we're in safe hands, was the outcome from that. We have got some learnings. There will be a report coming from Sandy Pedersen at Kestrel Group to give us some items to work on, but it was a really good start. I've been involved in a number of business continuity exercises, and yeah, by and large we did really well. The other point I'll draw your attention to has been the focus on internal audit, which will be covered in a later paper. But I would welcome any questions that you may have.
Councillor Ludlow.
Thanks, Chairman. Couple of things, Tony. Firstly, I'm wondering how long it's taken to get to this point, and how much longer you think it. I mean, I know the job is never finished, right?
In relation to
the framework and
the framework,
so firstly, how long has it taken to get to this point?
it's taken a bit of work. The framework has been pulled together by using examples from my past experience, but more importantly, aligning us with what a lot of the other councils have and their risk management framework. So at the moment, and what we're not quite toing and froing, but what we're working to agree on is the terminology that we're using and making sure that it's practical and workable for Environment Southland. I've got a date in there that will be finalised by the end of March, and I'm confident that we can. Oh, hang on, we're mid-March. We will be very close to that.
Easter gets a bit blame Easter.
Yeah, well, yeah, once we get to Easter, yeah. But yeah, we're almost there.
Okay, cool.
So yes, it has taken some time, but it's got to be practical and workable.
Thanks.
I guess for our next committee meeting, it'd be nice to see it.
Yeah.
As an appendix in the-
Absolutely.
Councillor McFarlane.
Just a quick question. I was just looking at the reds and the oranges and
Oh, yep.
Just trying to understand one, obviously we have a extreme and an inherent risk around community or sustainable assets. I just, when it catastrophic, there will be nothing left. I'm just trying to understand the actual meanings of each of the how bad is.
Yeah, I don't think I have it in this report, but we have shared it.
I'd love to see it and just understand, because there's quite a few red, like the reds, just to understand how does that work.
And that one that you've just pointed to, Paul Holst will be doing a deep dive into that. So I'm sure at some point he'll be touching on the definitions of that as well. But I'm happy to share with you, if you like, the definitions and how we've reached them. Part of that has been to get consistency across the organisation. So it also captures what we're doing with health and safety. So the terminology needs to align, so we're all talking the same talk.
An important question though, because I think we need to be right over the top of that particular page. Those residual risks that are extreme, we do not want
Well, it's just to understand how extreme they are, and from where say I'm sitting out in the community going, are they extreme? You know, is it? I'm just trying to work that one out.
And that's very much a focus of the executive as well.
Mr. Chairman, could I, on page 10, you've got a table there. One of the elements is risk appetite. I wonder what this actually means and how it affects the way the council responds to things and plans for the future as well.
Yep, and that is a chunky piece of work that we need to focus on. Our risk appetite will guide us as to what level of risk is acceptable, and as Councillor McPhail has just alluded to, some of those red ones may be outside our risk appetite, but our risk appetite will actually allow us to assess what is acceptable in the achievement of our objectives. And that is a piece of work that will involve the executive in working through that. So we haven't got there yet is my response, but it is a key area that we do need to focus on.
Yes, so just to follow up that, it is risk appetite is a pretty important sort of concept. So I guess what are we within the council sort of doing to think through that as an organisation, both I guess at the governance table, but also at the exec and then staff level? Is there something, any thoughts about having those conversations around setting the risk appetite?
What I'm wanting to do first is actually do the validations around our control effectiveness so that we understand what controls we do have in place, then putting parameters around our appetite and how it's affecting our objectives. Once we've clearly defined what our objectives are for the organisation, that will then backfill into the appetite.
I suppose just in regards to risk appetite, I'm sitting there thinking, well, this is organisational for their community that we're dealing with. If we get objectives and outcomes and things, they may have a different risk appetite based on how much it's going to cost them. You know, and I'm just trying to get the alignment, saying we're going to say, oh, this must be done, we can't risk this, and they're going, yeah, I should be right. We'll see how it goes. You know, there's trying to make sure that there's a divine, this within the organisation I'm just trying to see where everything comes down to probably outcomes within communities.
Absolutely, and
they're willing to take, so to speak.
Yeah. Brain trust of the executive effectively will discuss, debate, pull apart if you like, and actually come to a decision which will then be presented to this committee for validation as well. So there is a process that we go through.
Councillor Ludlow?
Thanks, Chairman. Just to follow that a wee bit, I guess I'm interested in how we work the timing of those really meaty risk conversations around the LTP and annual plan process, because actually they should be joint or at least parallel, right? So how do we make sure that we're having the right risk conversation at the right time of the year, I guess is my question.
I think we're having risk conversations all throughout the year. It doesn't have to specifically be around the LTP, but I believe that process is factoring in the risk discussions. As far as I'm aware, I personally haven't been involved, but my understanding is the executive have that focus. Amy may be able to elaborate more.
Yeah, I was going to say two things. I think some of that, whilst maybe not framed up specifically as a risk conversation, as you might not understand it around the table, has been happening as part of the conversations, particularly when you think about the assumption setting that you're doing, and the pros and cons of different pieces of work. The other thing I'd say is just remember we're on this journey and we are building this plane as we are flying it. So we're talking about building the risk artifacts and the constructs of what a risk framework might look like, and then thinking about how do we go about operationalising these going forwards. But to Tanya's point, there are conversations that are going on in the background, but but it's as we think about how we implement the framework that we're articulating here, those will be considerations.
I didn't mean to imply that we weren't having those conversations, but making it kind of explicit around some of the risk management stuff for this committee. Yeah, that's all.
Councillor Hall.
Yes, well, when I read this report, I sort of 1 through to 9.4 are all, this is sort of the high level, but then we are going to get into the more specific as we go forward.
All right. So we'll move the report. Councillor McFarlane, second. Councillor Hall, thank you. I think we'll be talking again soon.
Thank you.
All right. 9.2. We're going to have one of our deep dives on one of our risk topics. So on that risk matrix that we were just talking about. We're going to deep dive into those lines. On the mic. Welcome to
Tēnei mihi atu ki a koe e te kaikarakia i te timata. A ka nui te mihi atu ki a koe tau e ngā rangatira e hui mai nei tēnei. So, good start. Actually, I was just thinking that people have actually had the opportunity to read the report. I'll point out though that in the first couple of lines there, I have actually changed in the title. The word I've changed from mana whenua to tangata whenua. And the reason why, you'll find throughout this report that I've actually changed some of the terminology when we're talking about iwi Māori. We talk about mana whenua, we talk about a tangata whenua. Simply because we have this tendency within organisations to actually use those words randomly without actually realising what they actually mean. And they actually mean a lot more than just simply people. And there's actually the authority of people, the mana. The authority with regards to resources, natural resources, tangata being born of that land, whenua, connection to. So there is a difference in those things. Māori, we tend to talk about Māori, we give them that label, and the label is simply Māori, but it's almost like there's just one entity. Almost it's treated like they are all just one thinking, one mind, one perspective, and that's it. Without that word iwi being the bones, being the connections and so on, being individuals in their own right as well. We need to actually be aware of. There's a wee risk there that we can actually we can run without even thinking.
Very true.
But yes, I'd say the topic itself is actually probably a moving feast at the moment, depending on who you talk to and which perspective you look at it from. And so it's actually something that's quite topical these days. The thing is, with the relationships with the tiriti, etc., we're not talking about just a subject. We aren't talking about just a topic or a subject. We're talking about people, the essence of people. As with all our community, we have people in them, and we have people from different walks and so on. But with iwi Māori, we are talking about, when we talk about treaty, it is so integrated within or as part of the culture as well. That we need to be mindful of. So, yeah, it's really true.
I'll ask if there's any questions from the committee. Yes.
Yeah, Chair, I'm just really curious about the Charter of Understanding. How long ago was that charter agreed or signed?
25 years.
I was gonna say, well, and then the sort of following question is, is it subject to review and refresh at times, or?
Every 5 years it should be reviewed. Now, it is actually in the process of being reviewed at the moment. That actually sits with Te Marama and the Runanga. They asked to have a look at it first to see if it was from their perspective fit purpose. Where that is along the process, I need to check to see where it's at. But because it's going back to Runanga, it takes a while. It takes a while. And just because it isn't just the group of people that make the decision, it actually comes from a collective.
Just on that topic, we know how it works, but sometimes is that a little bit of a risk in the time it does actually take to perhaps get something confirmed, or even in the regulatory world of it might be a consent that's waiting. One recently where there was a complaint that had been sitting on somebody's desk. Is this an area we can actually work with Manapena where to improve? And we've been a leader with that 25-year agreement, but there's always room for improvement, and I guess it's that trust, communication, and just doing the best we can from where we're rank.
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, there's a little example at the back of this that actually relates to what we're talking about with regards to something sitting on, like a consent, sitting on a. Now, the thing is, it's actually like that's something that has popped up with in actually a number of occasions, and what I've actually said is, how can we? I mean, when you look at the resources that are available to Te Marama as representative of Runanga, there's a definite imbalance there as far as resources. And when I say resources, I'm talking about people that are actually there to address those things, like of consents. Now, what I've actually said before is that what can we do? They can't easily change the amount of people they've got, the resources, but we can actually change what we do to a degree, likes of, for example, consents. What tends to happen is that it gets to the 11th hour and then people realise that, it's supposed to consult with them on this. And then it happens, not every time, but it happens often enough that it gets flagged. And what tends to happen is that because it's the 11th hour and I've got a time frame that I've got to work to, the pressure goes on. And when we consider that Te Marama are dealing not just with us, but they're dealing with not only the 7 councils, but also central government organisations as well as other entities that have interests. So what I'm saying is, why can't we flag it or signal it a lot earlier in the piece that you may or may not have to consult with iwi, but it needs to be something that's actually at the forefront, so that you're not going down the stretch and then you've only got a certain amount of time and it actually gets jam-packed in, and then the panic button, or somebody looks for a button and calls it panic and pushes it. You know what I mean? So I mean, we can make people more aware. We can do things. We can speak to the consultants. We can do things that may be able to prevent that further on the track, down the track. Well, you know, because we're dealing with the vagaries and variables of humans, that may or may not work for some, but hopefully it actually takes care of some of those in the main, at least.
Councillor MacDonald, I see you've got a question online.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Chair. Although I'm not a member of the committee, I've just sort of come in, but I think thanks very much, Mike, for that report. it's an interesting topic, one which I think, if we're talking in terms of risk, more of the risk sits outside in the community than it does internally, in my view. I think this council needs to be more clear to the general public about the relationship, which I call, it is an exclusive relationship, iwi with the Crown. And I think we need to be more confident in the way we talk about that, this council. It is what it is, and it sits there, and it sits at the very top, that relationship. The other complicating factor is too that iwi come in a secondary role as a stakeholder in many groups too. So you could say that they perform dual roles at any one time. So my view is just one of clarity around that exclusive relationship, that it sits there, it's real. There's you can talk about it all day long, whether you like it or not, but it is there. Yeah, I would just like us to be more confident when discussing these matters. Is there any comment? Yes.
Yeah, particular quick question to end it with, or to Mike?
No, it was just a statement, Andrew. Thank you very much for that. But like, if anyone would like to further comment on that, yes, it would be.
Councillor Patel?
Look, I've been probably one of the ones been talking about the capacity and trying to work out what needs to be done and what we can help. And I certainly really back I believe we're in a unique, even looking at New Zealand's perspective, we have a good relationship through the Charter of Understanding. But I was looking at your recommendations, and I'm going to enjoy the day when we have, dealing with consents, that you have, people trained, well, not trained, but the recruitment processes, practices to ensure they reflect the organisation value around Te Ao Māori, that we can, that the trust and the relationship that we have people even within ES that can bring that perspective in and have a working relationship with Marama, that, I'm just trying to say there's a lot closer.
Yeah.
That the person comes to if it's through ES and as a regulator for a consent, that they don't necessarily need to be going to two different buildings and things like that. I think that in the future that there is that we're working together, and probably cuts out some of that bit of frustration in the community when working with, and that will also give the community better understanding of processes. When you're saying that at the 11th hour coming and saying, oh, you have to talk to iwi, that should be just saying, well, iwi are here, or we're together. And so that also leads to the question that, I mean, it's certainly a big risk at the moment, capacity of working that, because some aspects of the community think things are not going fast enough, and they always point the fingers and reputation and credibility and all that. And we don't want that, and you and we don't want that either, but we've just got to make it work better. But there was also another question around long-term plan, and I have brought it up about the funding, the relationship and what we do, and hopefully we see something there before the consultation document goes out to actually understand what we're actually doing. Have we actually, as a council, gone through that process to make sure that in the long term that we're actually trying to improve that relationship, which we haven't done. But that's not a question, but I'm supporting what you're saying, and hopefully we can move forward and be a lot more efficient on things.
Right. Well, any more questions from the committee?
What's the time of it? Did you want me to? Yeah, just.
Would you like to make a comment?
I'm happy to just make a comment, and I'm very grateful to Mike for pulling together this paper, because I think, from my perspective, the two things that stand out in this are the issues around the relationship. The relationship is at the heart of this, of our utility relationships, and there's a reason the word is there. And I think there, on page 15, of Mike's paper, there is a very important statement about relationship commitment. And if I'm thinking about this from a risk perspective, to me, the relationship commitment is at the heart of risk management, which is that this works well because of the relationship. It works well because, yes, there are definitely well-worn paths and there are processes and there is a charter of understanding, but in the end, the commitment to the relationship is the thing that mitigates the risk. And so from my perspective, that's the thing to keep at the heart of this conversation. As soon as we don't do what we say we will do, we put that relationship at risk. So being very clear about that and actively working and understanding is the way through. So that's where the mitigations for risk in this paper are based on that, based on our taking the time to understand and to be aware of what matters and to build on that relationship and be committed to it. So that's, I think, to me, the heart of the paper, really.
Yes.
So thank you.
Thank you for your time with us, Mike. So I'd like to move. Councillor Ludlow, second. Councillor Martin, all in favour?
Aye.
Against? Passed. Thank you very much, Mike. Appreciate it. We welcome back Tanya for the 9.3 internal audit report. Update on internal audit. Again, I guess you could take it as read, but if you just want to just provide a very brief summary, and then we can ask questions.
Sure. Very pleased to be able to say that we've kicked off our internal audit plan. PwC have completed the first audit, which was procurement and contract management. They were on site at the end of February, and we had a meeting last week where they presented their findings and their report. There were 11 actions that came from that report, and we were equally pleased to note that none of them were high risk. The ratings that PwC have used is low, medium, high. Low being matters that are unlikely to have a significant impact. In contrast, high is matters that are fundamental to the systems of internal controls. The 11 actions that have been recommended to us are all in the moderate category, and sponsors being Amy and Dominic were not surprised by the findings. They were deficiencies that we were certainly aware of. So the actions that have been put in, recommended to us by PwC are currently with Dominic as the sponsor to allocate resource and identify action timeframes.
Good summary. Any questions? Amy?
Sorry, not a question, but just to add on. So we'll bring, just because of the timing of that, we weren't able to bring that report in more detail around that report to this table this time, but we will be bringing those actions back, that action plan here, so you can see how we're progressing on completing the actions and closing those off. So that'll be part of the reporting program moving forwards. And we'll be lining PwC up shortly to start planning out the next audit on the list, which is asset management.
Sorry.
Yes, I guess, we've been working towards being able to accurately get a cost benefit analysis of everything we do, so that this report will be useful in doing that, getting that transparency, what we've spent and what we've got as a result.
Yeah, I'm just wondering if it would be useful for the PwC team to give us a wee presentation in the deputations part, or as part of the next.
Yeah, we can get them to do that.
Just to hear from them and.
Yep, online or in person, but it would be good to sort of hear what they say.
Yeah.
It's great that so the internal audit is one of the key tools in our committee's toolbox. we talk about risk and controls all the time, but actually getting a third party to come in and have a look for us, it's a pretty key.
Yeah,
as
I'm really
as
impressed
us.
that we've got to this point. That's great. Quite nice to hear from them.
Well, and they're more than happy to do that. It was just, as Amy mentioned, timings didn't align.
All right, someone move the paper. Councillor Horrell, second. Councillor Lowe, in favour?
Aye.
Against? Passed. Thank you very much, Tanya. 9.4, our health and safety with Paul. Welcome, Paul. I know you've been very busy lately, so thank you for taking the time to have these reports to us as well. It is appreciated. Thank you. I'll let you just provide a brief overview and then we can ask questions.
Sure. Good morning, everyone, and thanks for having me here. I take the report as read, but just a few things I'd just like to draw your attention to as officers. One is our external audit that was undertaken last year, by Robin Bennett from Cabot Plus. So this is part of an ongoing cycle, trying to get a external review of our health and safety management systems and how we're tracking against improvements on that system going forward. We like to do a sort of an audit every 2 years. Robin comes with a huge amount of experience, as I think I've already alluded to this committee before, and she brings a real pragmatic view to and solution-driven report to try and help us and get us further along that journey as such. So we have now received that report after the audit, which was undertaken last year, back in the last year. It's a follow-on audit from our 2021 audit. So she basically took those findings and just added onto those and tracked how we progressed and anything new that she happened to observe whilst she was here. So generally speaking, she's acknowledged in her report that we are on a journey and we've made some improvement in some areas, but there's still a fairly large chunk of work that still needs to be undertaken, and acknowledge that we are as I said, on that journey and started to make those improvements. Similarly to the previous report where we talk about actions being low, medium or high, similar approach from her view. And in this case, we've had several findings in the high space as such. And those are the ones that we need to start prioritizing going forward. So there's a piece of work happening as we speak around how to prioritize those actions from that report and put together a proper work plan to make sure that we address those actions, particularly the high ones, and then focusing on some of those easy wins on the medium and low ones. The other thing I just wanted to highlight was just we've seen an increase in our speeding across the whole organisation. So if we look at it across at least over the last 12 months, we've seen a relatively high spike in the number of speeding events, particularly in the sort of +10 range. So that is anything from 105 to 115 kilometres per hour. So it's in that range. So once we hit over 110, we actually trigger a notification.
I thought you had to talk to Nicole about that.
I
thought we clarified that. Is it out heading to a tap?
So there was a period of time where we had speed adjustments done around Invercargill and the city itself. That there was a bit of a teething period there where our system wasn't necessarily properly calibrated to those speeding change or those speed changes. That's all been subsequently sorted out, but we haven't necessarily seen a drop in the number of speeding events. And we're finding it a lot around the transitions. So it's transitioning from one speed limit to the next.
Especially when they keep changing.
Yeah. So that's definitely an area of concern for us as an organisation, particularly with our vehicles being out in the public eye, and obviously the risk associated with vehicles and driving. So, you know, there's definitely been some communication that's been gone out. We've, you know, it's been a topic at various team discussions and so on. And we've brought it up with our leadership forum. And I think we're sort of kind of at the stage now where we are reviewing our driving policy and looking at tolerances in that, in particular the speeding tolerances, and you know what are we going to do if people are continuously exceeding their speed limits. So that's the first piece of work off the run as such to try and address this issue. Those were the only two things I really wanted to highlight. So open to questions and discussion.
Yeah, just seeing the report, and I presume it's just because of the timing of the report that this year is well behind last year. I presume that. And have you got a report on to date of comparison to last year to see if we're seeing a trend? And if we went back 12 months to compare year on year how they're lining up.
Yeah, so I would suggest we most probably, you talk about incidents specific overall?
Yes.
Yeah, I would say we
just so we've got some comparisons for this year to last year.
Yeah, so I would say last year we had a really good reporting period where we had a significant number of incidents reported over that period, and we saw a spike as such. And I think that was because we really drove the need to report much harder. We have seen that drop off over the last 6 months. You know, I don't think we're getting as many reports, and now some will say, you know, have we improved that much that we're not seeing those reports and we're not having those incidents, or is it just about reporting again and maybe having to you know, highlight the need and importance of reporting? And I think it's exactly that. I think possibly I think we're still having the incidents out there, but we might have dropped off a bit on our reporting itself. Hence, you know, there's that anomaly of last year being quite high from a reporting perspective. So I don't think it's necessarily, if there was a trend, I would say the trend is the dropping in reporting potentially.
Yeah, just looking at those graphs, and you sort of analyse it out. The year before, the yellow were probably still in COVID, and we probably weren't out as much. And it's possibly the interesting though, it was just we're more focused. It might have been happening before, and we're not reporting it as well. It's just for us, when you look at all those graphs, the yellows in some cases are extremely high compared with this year. Looks better, but it'd be good to have some analysis. And so I was having a think about the speeding thing. One thing that would concern me, and I will not do it, is sit at 100 k's on a windy road on the wrong side of the road. I'm going to pass that vehicle as quickly and as efficiently as possible, and hopefully most of the time I'm within that 250 metre tolerance, because I would hate to see us actually put people in danger because we're saying you will not go over that speed limit when somebody's sitting at 80. On a windy road, you want to make sure that happens. So it'd be interesting to know whether the analysis are people sitting above 110 for a long period of time, or is it just a very short? It'd be interesting to know.
And that's a fair assessment. So you know, particularly if you're looking at the bigger spikes, so the spikes where we're hitting potentially up to 120 k's, sometimes more than that, is often in that scenario where there is a opportunity to overtake. And you know, when we do spot these, you know, these spikes as such, and do a bit of investigation, you do often find that it is on a piece of carriageway where it's actually, you know, where I would consider it safe to overtake. But it's still, it's still excessive, and it's still potentially, you know, the speeding itself is still breaking the law in that sense. So, you know, we still need to respond to that. And most certainly, as I said, those spikes don't go on for a long period of time. So it's not like someone is speeding for a long period of time. But what we have found is you will find consistent spikes in one journey, meaning that that individual has been overtaking several vehicles constantly and has, been spiking that tolerance, for a period of time in one journey. And that's where it kind of needs that further action and response.
I guess with driving, one of the other risks is you tend to drive on that thing on the screen, which is the GPS is you look at the speedo, that'll be the actual thing, but you're probably driving 4 kilometres faster than you would if you didn't have it, because the 100 k's on most cars is less than the actual, and it's probably something we should think about too, that we might be encouraging people to drive slightly faster than, because you're looking at that bigger number on the screen rather than the other. But yeah, it's just an interesting thing. I noticed that that's the one you're watching is the actual speedo. So unconsciously you're almost going slightly faster than you would have without it.
Yeah, and that's what I try and encourage people to do, is to drive to your speedo. Don't drive to your e-roads. Drive to your actual speedo of the vehicle, because as you say, inherently you will then be about 4 or 5 kilometers slower than what you actually go. So yeah, absolutely. And that's what we try and encourage. I know it's where they are placed. They are easily noticeable. You can see them and you can monitor them. But as I said, mostly we try and encourage driving to the speedo as opposed to the e-roads device.
Councillor Phil?
Yeah, the reality is if you're over 100 k's, you can get a speeding ticket.
Yeah.
The officer doesn't care whether you're passing a car or not.
Exactly.
As I found out. But I mean, that's the reality. It's breaking the rules, and we've got a system where you're not to break the rules, and there's no form of defence in court that you're going over 100 k's.
Yeah.
Yeah, my questions have been basically answered, but I would like to see the list of what you're working on, that Robin actually suggested to you. I'd enjoy that to be in your report.
Yep. So once we've, I think we're sort of at that stage now where we're going to workshop it with the executive and, put a bit of an action plan around that, and absolutely would be happy to share.
I'll just echo that, just because that was the point that I had. One, if possible, would actually be good to see their report as an appendix, just to see the words that they put in, because it is some validation for us in terms of.
Sure.
And secondly, to keep a table of those findings just in our report. Because there's a summary table with, is it remediated, was it ongoing, the likes.
Absolutely.
So people sort of just keep an eye.
Yeah.
Lalo, did you have a?
Yeah, thank you. Changed text slightly. The table 1, the training activities, which is really good, and it's great to see that there are many and varied training opportunities, including us in some of those is great, thanks. I'm wondering if we have a way of measuring their effectiveness as far as their, prevention/mitigation. How do we measure it? Can we? Might be an erroneous question.
I think there are ways ultimately that you can. It depends on what is being trained, and that's where we start to assess competence, not just, so have people actually understood and applying the things learned, not can they recall the things that have learned, because fundamentally that's what you do the training for. At the end of the day, we're not yet on that. It's part of what we need to do next as part of our training program. That's incredibly resource heavy to set up and do. That's not to say that we can't or shouldn't, but just that's a factor in thinking about how we do that. Also requires a system which we don't have at the moment as well, for like an electronic system for health and safety or learning or development.
Yes. But holistically, or should I say, theoretically, the more trained we are, the less incidents we should be having. Theoretically.
Yes.
So yeah.
We'll have the last question on this paper before we move to your next paper, because we've got a deep dive straight after this. So, Councillor Horrell.
Just following on from that, Paul, I thought that CERT training that we were involved with to a certain extent was very useful. Are you seeing any improvement with the training staff have had to, have to de-escalate aggressive behaviour, etc. Because I thought that was quite useful.
Yep, absolutely. We have been getting feedback from our staff saying, they see a lot of value in that training. In fact, yesterday we had another training provider giving us another option, and we're considering doing a combined option, combination of two forms of training around that cert. So absolutely.
And that's going to be in your next paper, isn't it? We're going to talk about people risk.
Yes.
Okay. So maybe we do move on, but we'll need to. Yep, can I have someone move, please?
Yep.
Second by Councillor Ludlow, in favour?
Right.
Thank you. So, the deep dive into, if you would like to give a brief overview, and then we can.
Absolutely. So, so very, very topical discussion at the moment. And I think a lot of you might be aware of the general consensus across the public and in other sectors and other industries that see similar concerns and issues around people and their behaviour. So just in a way of background, Environment Southland is a very public-facing organisation. We are dealing with the public in various formats and in various scenarios. Some of it is good, some of it not necessarily all that good. So, as a risk, holistically, it is very prevalent across our organisation, and we are open to abusive behaviour from what we'll refer to as customers or people or public. It's still being recorded as, in our top incidents, we're still seeing those incidents coming through, and we see them on a regular basis still. We are operating facilities that are public facing, and we are having that opportunity to interact and engage with these people. So the methodology around the bow tie is what we've used to assess the risk and to formulate the picture as such. One of the key things that came out of a series of incidents happening last year was the formulation of a task force, which was endorsed by the executive to look at this subject in particular. So the task force has been working through the bow ties over the course of the last 3 months. And it's an ongoing matter at the moment. So the task force is meeting on a regular basis, and they've got to a point now where that bow tie is just about done, and we're starting to work on a further action plan as such. And really what they've been focusing on that sort of kind of top event is, something has agitated an individual, causing them to want to respond in a certain way. And I think that's a kind of a all-encompassing top event as such for us. When we're looking at some of those hazards, this paper particularly focuses on the two sort of kind of top areas around some of our regulatory stuff that we do, and then particularly some of our engagement with our community at events or at meetings and so on. Now we do have some good controls in place, and I suppose if we had to look at our controls across other organisations, very similar to most of our colleagues in the local government sector as such. But it's the application of those controls is varying across our organisation as it is varying across others. So we've got a combination of controls from using technology to that kind of those soft skills around training and things like that. The technology that we've been using and looking at is particularly around people monitoring systems. We use a system called Get Home Safe. And then we also have systems that allow us to log and capture information on particular customers and give us an opportunity to kind of give us some forewarning. Also using technology like CCTV. We've got CCTV in our reception area. And more recently, the use of body cams and things like that to kind of de-escalate situations. as far as the effectiveness of the controls go, once again, I said we've got a lot of these controls in place and up and running and in some cases working well, but it's about the application of those controls and the actual discipline of using them. Dealing with individuals and people is very subjective. So people's tolerances are different. And I'm often having conversations with people in corridors about this, and their tolerance levels vary from, someone got a bit grumpy with me today. It doesn't bother me, versus someone who's had an interaction with someone, and the impacts and the effects are pretty dramatic. Hence, the risk ranking of this particular event is still sitting in that extreme space, and I guess it's the consequence of that still puts it in that extreme space. So, we, God forbid, we have the rogue shooter coming into a building versus the psychological impacts and the permanent disability on that particular risk.
Any questions from the committee? Councillor Horrell.
Just one on the body cams, you get the public seeing it and, oh, this is nonsense, but what percentage do you think, that might be only 1%, but we need to protect our staff, and the fact that they are having that, is that showing a direct, so there's a witness here, that's proven to be quite effective in those situations?
It's quite difficult to measure that because, particularly if you announce that you're wearing a body cam, you don't know how that person will respond differently if you didn't have that body cam. So it's quite a difficult measure. I think we're still sort of kind of in the immature stage of using them, so we're not necessarily using them in all scenarios. But those scenarios where they have been used and there could have potentially have been something that triggered them, then I would say they've been relatively successful. But as I said, it's a difficult one to measure. So
there is sort of a wee bit of a risk matrix whether you're going to use it or not, or is every time somebody goes out, do they?
I think there's I wouldn't say there's necessarily a risk matrix, but there most certainly is some more direction about when to use them.
Councillor Gibson.
Anecdotally, they seem to be a problem because of the words that come after the introduction of that cam. The word should be that I'm not that good at remembering, and that's me personally. So I need this thing for when I go back and write up your report, rather than saying, legally you can have your lawyer here and you can talk to him or do whatever. That just puts people's backs up. I think it's how it's approached. If you put it across that you are not that good, then and you need that.
And just to reiterate, obviously that is the most of the community are law-abiding citizens. If they feel like they've been camera, it's almost like, oh, I'm guilty. And that's a natural thing. I mean, and I've been in the situation with consent, audits and things, but it's just, you naturally do go, oh, they've got a camera, it's a wee bit of a, I'm not saying you can't, I'm support for staff safety, because there are situations where it will be confrontational, but it's I don't know how you get around the scenario, and we have to have some cameras on. It's a wee bit of a negative feel, but anyway, that's
there are a number of enforcement agencies that use these, and I imagine there are standard ways of using them and introducing people to them. I know we used them when we were ranging for duck hunting, and certainly found that people responded a lot more respectfully when they were there. So it is just a matter of how you introduce them, and as I say, that there must be standard protocols for that.
Councillor Ludlow.
Thanks. Paul, sorry, I might be admitting my ignorance, but does this deep dive apply to external people from the organisation, or does it also consider with internal staff relationships and risks? I'm particularly concerned about racial abuse or sexual harassment that we
Absolutely. So this paper itself doesn't necessarily dive into that aspect because it's another hazard as such, or hazard group that the aggressive task force has acknowledged that we do have those internal customer relationships, and it's exactly that. And I think our behaviour externally, we need to be and same goes with the internal behaviour.
This doesn't particularly reference any of the internal.
No. So I purposely kind of left that because a lot of that is managed through kind of people and capability controls, so sort of kind of those HR controls, and that's almost I wouldn't say a separate subject, but it does require almost a separate deep dive.
So, therein lies my next question. Should we do a deep dive into that part of the risk within the organisation?
Amy, in terms of because we're saying the risk profile of it, it's currently sitting in our risk register under, I guess, this line.
So I would. I'm not too sure what that particular hazard as such, reflects in the register itself, without having to.
Maybe we can take the way for some thinking. That'd be great.
I think it does need some thinking.
I've got two last questions on this one, Paul, before we move on. So Councillor Pemberton and then Councillor McDonald afterwards.
Has there been any analysis of we've had a change of policy around area inspections where we're giving the kids up a lot before? Has there been any change in behaviour around towards staff on that, or is it pretty too soon to be
I think it's a bit soon to get, but I would suggest, if just judging from the number of incidents that have been reported, I would say that's potentially an area that's maybe is working.
It's good. That's good to get.
Councillor McDonald online.
Yeah, look, I just want to support what you're doing there. I think it's really timely at the moment. There's a huge amount of anxiety out there in the general public post-COVID. We talk about this in everyday life of the challenges we're facing. So I think it's really timely that we're doing this. And I would say establishing a baseline is a good idea, because even with the group that's on this meeting today, I would say there would be a wide variation of what people, their expectations of decency are in talking to people. And I know we had experiences during the field days with different people, that variety there once again. So look, I support this work.
Thank you very much, Paul, for your time. And I think we'd all like to sort of keep abreast of it, and in your regular updates, I'm sure you'll probably be including a snapshot of where you're at. Someone like to pass this? Councillor Rowe, second. Councillor Morrison, in favour? Against? Passed. Thank you very much, Paul. 9.5 on the agenda, our audit engagement letter. Tom? Oh, Dom, of course. That's Dom. Yes, so this snippet is just particularly on the audit engagement letter. So in fact, I'll just get you just to clarify right up front in terms of this paper, what it's talking about, because we're going to talk about some other audit matters later on as well. If you'd just like to give us that brief overview to start with.
Yep, correct. Thank you, Chair. So this is the audit engagement letter for Deloitte, who are conducting the audit of our consultation document and supporting documentation. Ordinarily, this letter would have come to us a couple of months in advance. Reason for the delay has been associated with group orders. The reason that affects us is because the engagement letter sent to us is the same one that's gone across the sector. So the terms and conditions that have been developed in our letter are the same that's gone around everybody else. Obviously, with the timing and fee being the variables, otherwise the content of the letter is standard across the sector. So that's the reason it's coming very, very late in the piece. But in terms of comfort around the content of the letter, we know what we've got in our letter is the same as all the other councils.
terms of the audit fee is up on 2021 and at 111 grand. It's within our budget. Increases in audit fees. We saw an increase in our external audit fee as well. And I think the discussion around the level of fees and the scope of audits across the sector will be continuing for the next few years. Anthony Smith and the Deloitte partner and Scott Hawkins are on site and will be addressing the Audit and Risk Committee later on this morning. So if there's any questions in regards to the audit engagement letter, I'd be happy to take those.
Councillor Gibson.
What was the lift from 21 to now?
It's about approximately 20 grand from 2021. Yeah, sort of roughly around 21, 22%.
And to confirm that those fees go through Wellington, don't they? They're sort of set elsewhere.
Yeah, they're all moderated by OAG, and there are various caps that are applied across those fees as well.
Sorry, Chair, I'm looking at you, wondering if you remember what that webinar said. Actually, I wrote some notes, I remember, but I don't remember what they said about the fees.
I remember the head of OAG saying that he's more about audit quality, and that the quality of the audits are there, and that it does take time and effort to do the work. Councillor Horrell.
Yeah, these fees are always a bugbear of mine, and the fact that we have no choice in it is in our own system. If there might be a fee, say, for consents. If you're efficient, you may actually get some money back. No chance of getting something like that. I'll be for this because the Go Reporting organisation works quite well in providing information, whereas some they probably spend more time actually getting a result from.
Right. I'd certainly like to. I actually found it a really interesting engagement letter to read, and I was pleased about the amount of detail that went into it to actually show what they are auditing, which is a lot. And we are going to have them presenting to us later on today, so we can talk to them about that. They are essentially our eyes and ears, looking over the shoulder to make sure that the content of the LTP is correct. Or a second pair of eyes over it. So I was actually pleased with the amount of detail saying what they are doing. Right. Other questions? We will. If someone pass that. Councillor Ludlow and seconded by Councillor McPhail for talking. Thank you. And all in favour?
Aye.
Against? Passed. Thank you. Item 9.6. We have our conflict of interest report. Gary, welcome to the table. Thank you very much for your paper, Gary. I'm just moving to it now. We'll take it as read, but if you'd like to just give a brief summary.
Yeah, so obviously, as a public entity with public money, we've got a duty to ensure that we are transparent in everything we do, and that everything that our employees do as well. So the way we do that is through the conflict of interest policy, where if an employee believes they have a conflict in that would impact on their ability to make a decision or could bring the organisation into disrepute, if you like, by doing something they think they shouldn't do, we will manage that as an organisation. So essentially we ask our staff right at the beginning of the recruitment process to tell us if they believe or they have a particular conflict that can then be managed in their daily job. So for instance, if they are a relative of somebody that we would use as a contractor, we would ensure that they were not part of the process around that contract. We've chosen to do a piece of work for us. And so every year, so annually, we will go through a process where we will send out to all of our staff as a reminder and ask them to give us any information they have on any changes in circumstances or anywhere where they believe that they can have a conflict. We will then collect all that information and then manage it through the executive to ensure that we've got our checks and balances in place to keep us in a position where we understand where people may not be able to do a particular piece of work, or be involved in a particular piece of work because they could have a potential conflict.
I'll start with a question. Just in those scenarios where there are conflicts of interest or a perceived conflict, and then they are sort of managed, in terms of the person who's looking at that control to manage it, is it sort of just the direct manager, or does it sort of go up one, or does it get some extra eyes?
So a report will be given to the exec team around this individual has declared this interest, and the GM will then ensure that there's a managed way of ensuring that they don't fall foul of our policy.
Yep, we've come a long way in regards to this area.
I was just thinking
that. Second by Roy, in favour?
Aye.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
No, it's an important part of what we need to keep an eye on, but yep, it is in the right direction. Right, and on to the next, which is the elected members' interests. So side by side.
I think, can I just kind of say a note before Paula presents your report? The reason that we've included this particular item was based on feedback from last year where we were discussing the review of the employees' conflict of interest, and there was a request around the table for consideration of how, like a review, if you like, of how the elected members' interests are being managed and dealt with. And this will be very topical at the moment because we've been having conversations as full council actually since the start of the year on the acts that relate to this.
Okay. Well, if you'd like to provide a summary.
So if we can just note the report is read, there are three matters that I actually just want to bring to your attention. One is firstly the process matter around actually reviewing conflicts of interest. We do have a register which needs to be updated every 6 months. That actually hasn't happened, so we are actually in the process of doing that. That was just due to resourcing that we actually haven't been able to do that. So within this month, we'll have our Democracy Services Advisor actually contact each councillor with regards to the current register, and we'll have those updated, and we'll ensure that's actually under control. Secondly, quite a topical matter is decision making that's coming up, and we've done some work with regards to workshopping this with the council, and there may be some exemptions that we need to actually apply for with the Auditor General. What I can say with regards to that process, I've followed up with our lawyers and they will be helping us with that process. There is some information that I will be distributing to the council around information we may require from you. What we are wanting is for you to do some thinking around that and some of the decisions you may be making and whether there may be some conflicts that may come up. And that information will also actually provide you with what we need from you to help with an exemption. And finally, what I do want to say is thank you for your returns around your pecuniary interest. We have those all in. We have the register actually developed. What we're doing next with regards to that register is we're actually having our lawyers also review that, and if there's any questions that we need to ask, we'll come back to you. From that review and from the oversight of that, we will be actually then summarising and making the content public.
Councillor McPhail.
Just in regards to the exemptions, I'm always interested in about getting an exemption. If you have to apply for an exemption, are you saying that you have more than an interest than other people? As in, if you, it's like saying, they're saying, well, you do have, but we're allowing it.
Yes, that is effectively it. We are actually saying there is definitely an interest. You're declaring that interest, and then we're actually asking to actually have an exemption so that we can actually continue on with our decision-making process. And it might be that you don't get the exemption. You actually have to apply for it, so then it has to be decided by the Auditor General whether you actually can actually have that exemption.
I suppose the next question is just trying to understand, well, do we feel that we've got need to get an exemption?
I think that needs to be considered. It'll be information you provide to us. Yes, so it is on you as an individual and you need to be able to provide that information to us to actually, so that decision can be made.
Sorry, just for clarification. So, but if we don't think we need an exemption, then we don't declare an interest, and or we, because you're saying we have to prove to you that we need the exemption when it's ourselves. It's our own point of view.
Yeah.
And we could argue our own point.
Yes.
Obviously, I'm not. You're going to indicate that you're going to do this for us, as in apply for it if needed. Anyway, so I'm not against that.
Yeah, if that's a decision that needs to be taken, because you would need to have a reason for an exemption in the first place, as opposed to, so you want to be exempted so you can actually vote, as opposed to you declare a conflict and you step away from the decision making or the contribution to the discussion. So it's actually seeking an exemption so that you can come back in or remain in the decision making process.
It's just to clarify the process of how we get to the exemption.
Councillor Gibson first. Yep.
The 7 out of the 12 of us around here have farming interests, and it's Robert's Hardy annual. Are we clear to vote without conflict on plan change to Otahi? Plan change 1, in my view.
That is something I can't answer for you right now.
Can you do that sometime?
And that'll be part of us actually reviewing what those actual conflicts are. And that's part of that process around, do we need to get some exemptions around some of these plan changes?
So there's a process in place to look at this?
That's exactly what we're doing and what we're working with right now. Yes.
Great. Okay. Councillor Squammy.
That was my question, Mr. Chair.
Okay.
Just expanding, with exemptions done, is there any internal challenges that can happen within council that the exemption's been granted?
I don't believe so.
We can
No.
find out.
Yes.
I can find out, yeah.
Yeah, from council or from whatever, yeah, just.
Councillor
Look, it would be good to see some of the decisions, because normally the exemption per se would be when a whole lot of councillors had a potential conflict, and like the farming one, or it could be the urban ones, we're voting on city council having to have an expensive sewage upgrade. You could pretend, if you get to that level, you could say, well, these people, the urban people from Cargill have a potential conflict, because if we pass this, they're going to have an expense. In the old days, it was if you were no greater than the general public, that was sort of where it was. But I think we do need to get a bit more clarification, because the word exemption sounds like you're trying to get around something, whereas actually somebody's got to weigh up the public good and the ability of councillors to contribute to an issue. And if it's such a small thing, but it's good in those situations. I don't see many situations where an individual councillor is going to have to apply to the Auditor General for an exemption. It's more going to be in those, well, even in our LTP, if you went to that level, can half your councillors not vote on an issue because it's affecting urban? It actually makes a nonsense of what we're doing. But at the moment, it's a little unclear.
Sounds like, yeah, we've got a process to have some clarity for everyone. All right, can I have someone pass? Councillor McPhail and Councillor Horrell in favour?
Aye.
Against, and passed. Thank you very much, Paula. Item 9.8 is our committee's annual activity plan, which I'll just get Amy to provide us a update on.
Yep, so just reflecting what's coming up as we do each meeting, and noting just a couple of changes. Firstly, noting that we've made sure that we've got some extra meetings in this year, so we are in fact actually meeting quarterly, and the 9th of October meeting's an extraordinary one to consider matters related to audit in relation to our annual report. We also were hoping to present to you or talk to you about our legislative review. We've actually just pulled a brief pause on that, given the changes that are happening at a government level and the different focuses on legislation there, to make sure that we are actually focusing on areas that do in fact matter or may matter given the change in government and their particular focus. So that's a potential pivot of focus for us. So we'll bring that to the next meeting. Had a chat with the chair about the annual activity plan, and we'll now be reporting on cybersecurity to you on a biannual basis. So that will not be featuring this meeting, but we'll be talking about that next meeting. And we also had hoped to talk to you about just do a risk scan and review on an annual basis. We alluded last meeting that with the reports that those are based on were expected out early this year. To date, there's only that one that's come out, but the other two are due soon. So we'll be keeping an eye out for their published dates and bringing that report to you next meeting.
So it's an important one-page document because it is our essentially how we tackle the year. Does anyone have any thoughts or comments? It's important we sort of get that right. All right. So pass, please. Councillor Ludlow, seconded by Councillor Ludlow, in favour?
Aye.
Yes, passed. Thank you.
Really efficient, Chairman.
Yes, we're gonna big afternoon, so right, we will move into public excluded if
The reasons being to prevent disclosure or use of official information from proper gain or advantage, and to enable any local authority holding the information to carry out without prejudice or disadvantage commercial activities.
moved by Councillor McFowle, seconded by Councillor Morrison, in favour?
Aye.
Against? Passed. Thank you. So we are just going to have a
Stop live streaming.
we're just going to have a 5-minute tea break. So just a cup of tea, toilet, and then back to our chairs, please.